Hi, Davi here, and today we have a new episode in the art review series, and today we'll be checking out the work of asteroid_ill, or Hanzai Committee. We'll just call this guy or this chick or this artist Asteroid. And yeah, let's begin. So a lot of their work is environment art. I mean, they do character design, but it's not the main thing. I mean, it's part of their story, obviously, but right, they usually have like this one person in the scene, but most of their scenes are actually not populated. It's just this one person kind of there. Yes, it's for the narrative, but also to indicate scale. But I think it's mostly for the narrative. And they do like to keep their scenes somewhat empty in terms of the people. But everything else looks really filled up, right? And it's so atmospheric. They do use a lot of colors, which I do like. It reminds me of the work of RossDraws and maybe a bit of Sparth. I will link their links in the description below, but the point is they do have a lot of like vibrant colors, and I think that's something that is it's just nice to see, because if you look at a lot of typical concept art, it's very like dark and, you know, dystopian-ish. Even the fantasy types of artwork or themes, they're a bit too dark, not enough for me. Anyway, I mean, you can see this, there's not enough light sometimes. Well, to be fair, if you look at ArtStation, aside from that, there are more typical concept art pieces like this one, where it's a bit more inviting, even though you can tell with this piece, it's like post-apocalypse world. It's not exactly like dark. It's inviting. It reminds me of the world of, there's this anime, I think it's based off of a game, Nier Automata, something. It has those vibes where even though it's a dead world, I don't know, it just seems like you want to be in that kind of apocalyptic space. And I'm guessing they're doing these types of illustrations in Photoshop, because I do see they are employing quite a few like effects or layering systems. You do need to have good layer management for this type of thing. If I was if I was required to do this, or if I wanted to do this, I would have to go back to Photoshop, because I think it's much more flexible. I think Clip Studio Paint is just more, it's way more, it's better for like drawing, painting, like 2D artwork. I mean, this is technically 2D, but I don't know, it just for this kind of thing, it just feels better to do it in Photoshop. Oh yeah, it's the photo bashing as well, right? Because you can see they are adding a bit of photo textures in the background, right? In this case, if you look at the buildings, do you see those windows? Those are not painted. They're like photo edited, filtered out textures from an actual building, I would assume. And then they just kind of skewed it to match the perspective of the building. And even the lighting effects, like, it's just easier to do this kind of thing in Photoshop. And you'll notice that again. Oh shit, if you look at the bottom half, look at those grass brushes. I think they're the default brushes in Photoshop. I believe Photoshop does have some default grass brushes. And you'll see this a lot too with like the work of Sparth. Again, I will link his links in the description below, but it's sort of a mixed media approach where you have all sorts of techniques being used, and I'm guessing even custom shapes may be used here. I do know Sparth likes to use a lot of custom shapes, but I think even for Asteroid over here, I think they as well are using some custom shapes here and there, but definitely a lot of photo textures being used. What I do like though is that when they're doing their characters, they're actually painting them instead of photo bashing or adding the textures. If you look at the background, I mean, it makes sense. You usually would paint the stuff where you need the most control, and obviously In this case, it's going to be the characters, right? Because that's where you need the focus to be on. But for stuff that's not, that's important, but it's not like the main thing. They're more of a supplement to the narrative. For example, the background here. Look at how the trees or the foliage was added to these buildings. Even the photo textures of the buildings, they're all just sort of implanted or pasted in, or bashed in rather. And if you look at the top right, you do see some bird brushes. You see this too in a lot of the architectural illustrations. It also adds a sense of scale. Aside from adding people, it does add a sense of scale in terms of atmosphere going above, right? And it adds to the vastness of the space. I mean, yeah, you can just add like one person there, but if you add some birds, in this case, in this image, upper right, you do see, like along the light rays, you do see some bird brushes being used again. It just adds more of that depth, and it makes the space way larger. And yeah, look at the buildings. It's very, I'm guessing it's just custom shapes after custom shapes. Because right now, if you look at the windows, I think they're using the same sort of shape they've used in previous images. So obviously, over time, you're going to develop your own library of your favorite tools. And I think this artist has sort of a set. They basically have an established system and it works. A lot of their work is very atmospheric. Now this one isn't as vibrant. I mean, there's color, but it's not like, I saw one piece here. I think it's a red something. I'm not sure where it is, but I saw it earlier. I'm not sure if it's, oh, this one. I think, was it this one? Yeah, I like this one. It has an autumn theme, lots of yellows, reds, very warm. And I'm not sure what these pillars are called. I think they're the ones in Japan. This one is inspired by some kind of Japanese theme. But I mean, look at the amount of, even the way the shadows are done, you know, being casted, like the tree shadows being casted on the pillars. If you look at the upper part of the pillars, it's all in shadow, right? So like the areas in light are kind of sporadically placed, and I think it just adds a bit of that diversity when it comes to light. It's not just one major light and then one big shadow. Like seeing this kind of back and forth between light and shadow, I think it also adds even more depth to your image. I do like the colors here, very warm, very inviting. I do see some birds kind of sitting on top of the pillars in the second beam, right? Pretty cool. But yeah, again, if you look at the characters below, they're painted in, but everything else in the background is mostly sort of bashed in. I mean, there is some like painting, but it's more like big shapes, and then you add the textures and custom shapes within those shapes. But again, for a scene like this, you do need to be well versed when it comes to your layer management. Pretty cool, right? And even though they're just focusing on like one big scene, one huge sort of epic scene, is epic the word, or atmospheric scene? There's still some story in it, right? Like they're relating the whole scene with one character. That's kind of a common theme in their work. So they're not doing any sort of wild pieces where you have a bunch of people. It's just it looks quiet. I think that's the word I'm looking for. A lot of their artwork, their illustrations, it's very quiet and peaceful. And they do like adding a lot of light rays, which I think really works for these types of illustrations where you have like a big scene, a big wide scene. And they're really into the whole, oh, I do like this character right here. I do see a couple of rake brushes being used. And it just looks so cool. You know, like this kind of mix between painting and photo bashing, I think. You see this a lot in concept art. I think it is its own thing. Because I don't know. This one reminds me a little bit of RossDraws, right? If you check out his paintings on his YouTube channel, sometimes he'll do environments like this one where there's a lot of emotion, right? There's a bit of narrative there. But he also has this thing where his artworks are, even though they're vibrant, they have that quiet vibe to it. Like you can just keep watching the piece or the painting or the illustration, and you're kind of consistently satisfied, and I think that's a good thing. Oh, this one too, I like this one. Again with the pillars, the Japanese sort of pillars, right? The composition, I guess, is also a big thing here. That's why it works. So the composition is good. The big shapes are good, in this case the pillars. The diversity of tools. Also, photo textures, custom shapes, layering effects. I think this may be my favorite piece. Oh shit, I do see some thumbnails below. If you can see, lower bottom of this zoomed in image. You do see some thumbnails there. I'm not sure if they're complete pieces or they're just really small illustrations. And yeah, it's the lighting too. It's very, I think that he likes, or she, or this artist likes to add like shadows that come from the foliage of a tree or the leaves, and it just adds even more of that textured look, right? For example, if you look at the pillars behind or further back, even though the pillars themselves don't have as much texture because of those sort of spotlight or ray lights being casted on those pillars, it does add that texture as well, or it just gives that extra grit, right? Instead of those pillars being just one solid silhouette, it just adds a bit more oomph and texture. And I do like how when they're painting, the paint brushes themselves don't have to have texture, and the reason why is obviously because they're already adding photo textures and custom shapes. So I think if you use really textured brushes as well, I think you're just overwhelming the piece. So I think this artist was able to find like a right or a good balance between more solid brushes or shapes with textures, right? It's a happy medium. Is it the same thing? This one feels more finished. Oh yeah, they did add the text. And yeah, don't be afraid to use like sometimes people will say it's kind of cheap to use like grass brushes or foliage brushes, or you know, like bird brushes, but if it helps the illustration, then F it. Oh yeah, I also see a lot of particles being used. So splatter brushes, particle brushes, they all help, guys. And I can see some of those particle brushes being expanded and blurred out, right? So you do have to make that in a new layer, and then you make it big, obviously, so you can actually see it, and then you add a bit of maybe Gaussian blur, maybe motion blur to add this sort of effect. This is very common in more concept art environment communities, right? So same place, it's the same character, I think. She's a masked character. She's painted in, right? And then everything else has that nice bit of like mix of textures. And in some places, it's just a solid brush. Don't be afraid to photo bash, by the way. it can look ugly, so just don't make it ugly. Because sometimes you'll see this a lot in some of the comments. Maybe not in my channel, but in some other channels where a lot of like illustrators, they'll diss photo bashing, and I'm like, bruh, are you telling me this looks like shit? I don't think so. If you want to see a kind of illustration style without, or with just say custom shapes without a lot of like photo bashing, check out the work of Sparth. Like he doesn't just paint, he'll use like a lot of different techniques within Photoshop. I think that's his main program. But yeah, I would put Asteroid or this artist along with Sparth and RossDraws. Right? Look at that mix. I think it's a good balance. It starts to become a little photorealistic in the background, right? Or in the environment itself, which is nice, and it's balanced out with that painterly vibe when it comes to the characters. It's a good blend, a good mix. For example, if you look at this image, if you look at the trees kind of protruding out of the, or behind the pillars or those branches, I mean, that's a photo, a PNG of a branch, or maybe it's even a brush, right? Like, you don't have to paint every single thing. For a scene like this, you gotta save time. And it's not always about saving time as well. It just looks good, right? Like, you want to make use of the features and the capabilities of your program. And I think Photoshop is way better at this than say Clip Studio Paint. For pure drawing, painting, maybe even animating, Clip Studio Paint is the king. But when it comes to these sorts of full scenes, bigger scenes, where you have to mix a bunch of elements, I think Photoshop is still king. Use both. Ooh. Same sort of theme. But here's the thing, as you can see, even though you're doing this piece, like over time you can do the same exact piece in a different kind of way, right? And over time, for example, if you look at this piece right now, just try to see the architecture of it, how it's done, and then look at something like this, right? Do you see the development? Like, you can use the same sort of theme, subject, but you can always make it better the next time, right? So you don't think that once you do something, you can't revisit the idea again. And I think it's a lot of artists do this, where they redo one of their old pieces, and it's a great way to see their development and test your own sort of progress. Right? Look at the storytelling here. Again, ray lights, lots of lighting effects. If you look at the bottom half, the foreground, the way the grass is done, it really reminds me of the work of Sparth, right? And the vibrant colors are there. Although I think our Asteroid over here likes to balance that vibrant colors, that style, with a bit of that photorealism, kind of like a RossDraws. I think RossDraws likes to do more. I mean, obviously he likes his character designs and art, but he's pretty good. I think he did study concept art in some kind of art school, so he has that sort of a base background. So it really does show whenever he does his environments. Ooh, what's this? So they're underwater. Pretty cool, right? Oh, I'm not sure how they did the water effect. Like, how do you put that in and bash it? Yeah, photo bashing does take some skill, and even more so if you start kind of painting with it and mixing both that photorealistic look with a little bit of that painting look. Wow, this scene is underwater, right? And you can see some grass growing in kind of the bottom. You do see the indication of bubbles, right? The light rays again. So this person is swimming. Again, it's usually just one character. Look at it. It's so what's the word where you're like you feel like you're in the place, submerged. Well, they are technically submerged, but like you're in the scene, like you feel the scene, right? Oh, she's hot. She's kind of hot right now. Look at that, it's so cool. I'm so glad I found this artist. And hopefully you check this artist out as well. I think they have a Pixiv account as well. It's listed in their or in this Twitter or X profile. Right? Look at that. Do you see that development? As you go further back, it does get more simplistic. I mean, they're still good, but obviously as you go earlier or more recent in their timeline, the better they just get. Like they just get the nuance, it seems like, with the lighting, with the composition, with the shapes. And it's so cool because it doesn't look like they're overdoing anything. It feels like everything is just enough. I mean, look at that. Oh my god. Definitely one of my favorites now. So hopefully you enjoyed this art review. I do recommend you check out this artist. Follow them, subscribe to their artwork. And again, I will be linking Sparth and RossDraws as well. And obviously this artist in the description below. So that's it for this art review. Hopefully you enjoyed. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.